After I made the last video all about a lorry driving game that no one cares about, I instantly began work on a Halloween themed video, hosting a live stream straight after release to capture footage. And then I stopped working on it for a bit, and then that bit became 5 weeks, and before I knew it, it's December now. The video was originally going to be about Medieval and its PSP remake that people didn't like. It was gonna be great, it was spooky, the PS4 remake was about to release. The timing could not have been more perfect. But then I just lost all interest in doing it. And although it would have been pretty funny to release a Halloween video halfway through November, now that December has rolled around, I feel like it would be taking the piss just a little bit. So I guess I'll shelve that idea for next year then, because I think I have some unfinished business to attend to. And because I'm such a nice lad, to celebrate 21 years of me blessing this earth with my presence, what better way to celebrate than a series of videos on Call of Duty and its weird ports. Yeah, actually I can think of quite a few. Remember that time I looked at Call of Duty on the DS? Well, this is basically that, but it's going to be 4 videos, each looking at a different game. So, that was 2 years ago now. And, to a little bit of my credit, I did release some videos in that series, but I did promise 4, and I've had the 4th game ready and waiting to be played since all the way back when I announced the series in the first place. I just got a bit distracted along the way, and obviously here I disappeared off the face of the planet for a couple of months, because I'm depressed and have no motivation to do anything with my life right now apart from play Animal Crossing. And not even the good one. The crappy mobile game. I know, I've really hit a low point. So now that I'm 23, I feel like it's finally time to finish the series I started to celebrate me turning 21. Wow, who saw that one coming? Gather round, boys and girls, and let Grandpa Frecky tell you why he should never commit to long-term video projects again. Welcome to Port Patrol, the show where we look at weird and interesting ports and spin-offs of video games, and today we are taking a look at Call of Duty World at War Final Fronts for the PlayStation 2. Call of Duty is a series I've always had in my mind as starting with the Xbox 360 and PS3 generations of consoles. Because honestly, I'm still not convinced that the series even existed before Call of Duty 4 happened. All the other games just happened to materialize into existence alongside it. So the Call of Duty games that were released on the generation before, stuff like the Big Red One and Finest Hour, have always interested me, because in my stupid pea-brain, Call of Duty and PS2 don't really overlap. They're good games in their own rights, but not really Port Patrol material. At least that's what I'm telling myself right now to save myself the effort of capturing footage for them until I can actually be bothered to cover them one day. And I think you'd probably agree, outside the context of my tiny little pea-brain, there's nothing really weird about them. By the time of World at War, however, I think we can all agree that Call of Duty had become fully committed to the next console generation. After all, Modern Warfare had ushered in a new era for the series, being a massive step up over the third game, and the series had now ditched the PS2 in favour of the Wii in terms of weaker hardware ports. And don't worry, we'll get to those one day, which honestly makes it even more confusing to me, that they then decided to go back and make a PS2 version of World at War. Now that is Port Patrol material. Released the same day as the game people actually wanted to play, instead of being handled by Treyarch or Infinity Ward, it was instead developed by Rebellion. Nowadays they're most well known for the Sniper Elite series, but sadly for me, by the time this game released, the thing they were probably most famous for was the god-awful crappy, just straight up miserable port of Medal of Honor Underground for the GBA, a game I covered all the way back when I considered this a decent way to start a video. Hello and welcome to the Fracky Review Show. Oh, just don't watch this video, please. So, what's it gonna be? A hidden gem of the Call of Duty series, or just a big pile of stinky doo-doo? Well, let's find out. As is becoming what feels like a tradition in my videos, I have to state that while it is literally called Call of Duty World at War, this isn't strictly a port, but sadly Port and Spin-off Patrol doesn't quite have the same ring to it. That Final Fronts is very important, because honestly the only part of this game that even resembles World at War is the first American campaign set in the Pacific Front. The other two campaigns are another American one set during the Battle of the Bulge, and then an English one where you advance on the Rhine River. 23 years old, and I still can't say river. Complete with their own storylines and environments not found in the original game, it means that realistically, only 1/3 of this World at War game even remotely resembles World at War. There's no Russian campaign whatsoever, which is a bit weird, seeing that you can't really get much more final than the literal defeat of the Nazis. And it's also a shame because that campaign was definitely the highlight of the original. So for comparison's sake, I imagine a lot of the stuff I talk about here will be centered around that first campaign, but I'll be sure to talk about the other two later on. Final Fronts positions itself as a sort of retelling of the original game's campaign, with some minor tweaks and changes, but not enough of them that you can't identify it as World at War, apart from the obvious fact half of the game's missing. Like, it has the same style of cutscenes, although nowhere near as flashy as the originals, and the majority of the voice lines had to be redone for the scenarios the game puts you through. I guess Kiefer Sunderland was just really not busy that year.
Sergeant Roebuck, ain't we supposed to be taking the airfield?
Yeah, well, the airfield's over there. We're pinned down here. You got any ideas how we're gonna get past the Japanese? And I'm listening.
The levels themselves are largely fateful, but not fatefully large, like the airfield from the base game, which was literally a massive field. Look, there's the air. It has been scaled back to like 2 runways you have to run across. I know Call of Duty has a reputation for having linear campaigns, but I always felt my favourite sections from them have been areas where it opens up and gives you some options as to how you're going to go forward, so it was disappointing to not really get that here. There's a tank level later in the game that takes place in an absolutely massive space, and the final level features an assault on a fort with quite a large playing field, so it's clear that the game could handle it, but sadly it's never fully realised. Sadly, the limitations of the PS2, or the limitations of something at least, really stop it from reaching the same level of quality as the original game. It follows all the same tropes you would expect, like turret sections, destroying enemy AA guns, taking out tanks with bazookas, and all the other things people were already tired of all the way back in 2008, let alone now. There's nothing offensively wrong with any of it, but it's really bland and repetitive, especially when put in comparison to the real deal. Even ignoring some more impressive stuff that I wouldn't expect the PS2 to handle, like destruction or big set pieces, it's more the little things like the pacing and level layout that really hurts it. There's no edge-of-your-seat, surprising moments like getting ambushed by soldiers pretending to be dead on the ground, or getting caught off guard by a booby-trapped area, or going over the trenches of an area you just bombed and seeing the devastation you caused. Nor are there little extra flourishes from AI soldiers that help flesh out the levels. For the most part, it's just you go forward and you shoot things, with very minimal interaction between yourself and your squad mates. So in many ways, it plays like an older Call of Duty, but even falls flat in that comparison. Because even this very sterile and by the numbers level design would be forgivable. After all, the DS Call of Duty games were similar in that regards, but I still loved them. But it becomes much harder to forgive when the actual gameplay doesn't hold up either. Sure, on a very basic level, you look at it and can tell it's a Call of Duty game, but actually sitting down and playing it is a different story. It's like playing Call of Duty, but if it was really heavy and sluggish. I could not get along with how the game plays at all, and I'm not even sure how to describe it, apart from heavy and sluggish, which I literally just... Why did I write that down? I just couldn't get a feel for aiming. As if it was too sensitive, but also not sensitive enough at the same time. The aim assist only helps so much. It does that nice, snappy thing regular COD does, where if you aim down your sights close to an enemy, it snaps onto them. Problem is, half the time it snaps onto an enemy, and despite being lined up, you still miss. The assist itself is also really sticky, drastically slowing down your view even when you hover over an enemy you can barely see. I tried turning it off, but that also turned off the snap to enemy aim down sight thing, and when I already struggle with how the game controls, I felt having it enabled was the lesser of two evils here. Thankfully, the guns on the whole are pretty satisfying to shoot, though that's largely down to the fact that the majority of them are directly ripped from Call of Duty 1, 2 and 3. So I'm not really sure how much credit I can give them here. I think there's only around 4 guns in this game that are actually based on their World at War counterparts. Which is a little weird, considering it's meant to be, you know, World at War? As someone really familiar with the actual World at War, it was really weird seeing something that looked and sounded so much like the real World at War, but then you had all these guns that, like, look completely out of place. Like always, I feel like I've been really negative on the game so far. So I feel like I need to state that despite all the problems I have with the game, I don't think it's a bad one. I don't think I can really call it good either, but I feel like it's worth saying that there isn't really anything offensively wrong about it. Apart from the fact the square button is what you press to throw back grenades, try explaining that shit, and while I wouldn't say the game itself is very hard, it is very easy to get yourself killed without realizing it, like walking directly into line of sight of a machine gun nest you didn't notice, or constantly getting killed by the same fucking tank you couldn't see because the level's really dark, so you have to replay the same section over and over again until you find it! And the game gets really cheeky with the grenades by the end. Like, you will just be walking down a corridor, and then from behind a door, some cunt will throw 5 grenades at you. It's kind of pretty funny, actually. I kind of like that. The biggest disservice the game does to itself is the fact you can compare it to the real deal. It doesn't hold a candle to the original in any way whatsoever, though I would argue that the graphics are really nice. There's something about gritty 6th generation realism that really appeals to me. I think it's the fact that the power wasn't there yet to do realism properly, so it's still stylized in its own way. The ragdolling soldiers are a nice touch too, even if they bug out occasionally, but despite how it nailed the look of World at War, it doesn't change the fact that you're playing a Call of Duty game with sloppy controls, running through poor imitations of what were once great and memorable levels, at a frame rate that is constantly in flux and stutters every time it tries to load in something new. But this game does something weird. I had a really rough time getting into this game, and didn't really enjoy my time playing it. I was just about to give up on playing it when I finished the first part of the Japanese campaign and moved on to the next one. And it's here, away from World at War's shadow, where it got to stretch its legs, do its own thing, and that the game finally began to click for me. Seeing the snowy landscape as you load into the second campaign is like a breath of fresh air. Suddenly you're not playing a cheap imitation of World at War. You're playing something completely different. Something that's actually fun. Admittedly, it's not like this is breaking new ground for the series. This type of snow warfare had already been explored in COD 2, which is where I think the majority of the Nazi soundbites come from here, but breaking away from World at War was probably the best thing this game did. The new location gives some much needed variety to the guns we're using, and I think it even runs better here too. I guess flat polygonal houses are a lot less stressful to run than the thick forests of the first campaign. There's even some small set pieces, like getting away from an enemy tank, that help spice up the levels and keep things interesting. And the inclusion of a British campaign to add even more guns and environments was really appreciated too. It was during these levels that I had the most fun with this game. Ironically, once World at War stopped being World at War. I found the layout of these city levels a lot easier to manage than the denser, complex jungles, and the fact the German soldiers actually stay in their fucking lane, unlike the Japanese ones, helped me get to grips with the controls a lot better. I wasn't fighting with the camera constantly to look at an enemy running directly at me, as it was getting stuck on another soldier in the distance. Instead, I was using the snap aiming with beautiful accuracy. I was admiring the smaller scale set pieces, like how parts of buildings would crumble as tanks crashed into them. And when the European campaign was done and dusted, sending me screaming back to Japan, I must admit I was a little disappointed. A lot of the problems I had before came back immediately, as if all the practice I'd gotten had been for nothing. I was getting constantly assaulted by enemies that had spawned behind me, or getting one-shot by rocket launchers I hadn't seen hiding in the trees. And to top it off, the last section of the last level bugged out for me. So what was meant to be an epic finale, fighting against waves of enemy soldiers as my squad mates barely survive, was me, just on my own, no music playing whatsoever, with enemy soldiers running in circles or getting stuck on doors. Yeah, that about sums it up. I'm not really sure what to make of this game. The bits that actually resembled World at War I didn't like, but the rest of it that had nothing to do with World at War ended up being my favourite parts. I guess in that sense it's a pretty terrible port of World at War. The gameplay is sluggish, the frame rate all over the place, the graphics nice, the story bare, the level design plain, and even compared to the other PS2 Call of Duty games, it's a pretty poor showing. Not even supporting any form of multiplayer or co-op, despite what this Metacritic review would have you believe. Come on guys. It's obvious they're talking about the PS3 one, just why is it here? There's no Nazi zombies, which I feel like was probably a given. And seeing that this game was made alongside the real one, with Nazi zombies sort of being like a last-minute secret Easter egg, I can't exactly blame them for not including it here. And yet, despite what a rough time I have with the Japanese campaign, I can't deny that I really enjoyed the rest of the game, which puts me in a really weird position where I'm not even sure if I want to recommend this game or not. My view of the game varied so much during my playthrough that I've had to rewrite various parts of the script multiple times, which is probably why my tone and view throughout this video has been all over the place. Because I have been all over the place about this game. If you want to play this game to see what World at War on the PS2 is like, don't. Because it doesn't hold a candle to the original. But if you have a hankering for some classic Call of Duty gameplay, and don't mind slogging through some boring levels to get to it, I think you might have a pretty enjoyable time experiencing what this game has to offer. World at War on the PS2 isn't what I was expecting when I went into it, but I'm okay with that, because it was the parts of the game I wasn't expecting that ended up being my favourite parts.